In a recent interview that made waves across the political sphere, Marxian economist Dr. Richard D. Wolff unleashed scathing criticism of Donald Trump's economic policies, setting off what many believe will lead to Trump losing it once he hears the blow-by-blow critique. Wolff begins by outlining the core of his critique. Trump's tariff blitz, or what Wolff calls a big, beautiful bill, a sweeping strategy involving blanket tariffs on hundreds of countries, even including long-standing allies. Wolff asserts that this plan is economically illiterate, born of a distorted victim complex rather than coherent strategy. Key points of Wolff's attack: tariffs, taxes on working families. In a powerful segment of the discussion, Wolff clarifies that tariffs are simply taxes. A tariff is a tax, paid by the American company to the government, which is then passed on to the consumer. He warns such a sweeping tariff scheme threatens a full-scale recession and punishes ordinary Americans for Trump's political theater. Empire in decline, not Trump's triumph. Wolff insists Trump's economic aggression betrays desperation, not strength. He argues that the era of American global dominance has waned, and Trump's strategy is a last-ditch effort to lash out rather than legitimately stabilize the economy. Unintended unity against the U.S. One of Wolff's most damning observations. Trump's tariff campaign could backfire geopolitically. Instead of isolating adversaries, it may unite them. He points to the EU, China, Japan, South Korea, and even fractured blocs like BRICS as potentially aligning in response to U.S. economic aggression. Why Trump will go nuts? Wolff doesn't mince words. He argues that once Trump is briefed on how this economic strategy is not only misguided, but economically damaging and politically reckless, he'll go nuts. Why? Skill market punisher. Trump has built his brand on being the boss who wins. But having that brand crushed under economic reality is a direct assault on his identity. Power threat. Wolff warns that Trump's policy is fracturing both domestic and global coalitions that prop up American hegemony, something Trump views as a direct personal and ideological threat. Media brutality incoming. If headlines begin to read, "Economists called Trump's tariffs an epic policy failure," and it's the kind of blow Trump can't rope-a-dope his way out of. What Trump might do next. Wolff doesn't speculate on Trump's next move. He paints the moment as a crossroads. Will Trump double down, pushing harsher tariffs and budget cuts, or pivot? According to Wolff, the former is more dangerous, risking an all-out trade war that could bode ill for the U.S. and dollar strength. In this powerful and dramatic installment, Wolff launches a no-holds-barred assault on Trump's economic doctrine, hitting the former president on multiple fronts: tariffs, inequality, and reckless brinkmanship. Tariffs as class warfare. Wolff frames Trump's so-called big, beautiful bill of sweeping tariffs as thinly veiled class warfare against American consumers, particularly the working class and poor. Echoing his earlier arguments, he contends that these tariffs act as regressive taxes that raise everyday prices. All products, from groceries to electronics, become costlier as businesses pass on the tariffs. Hit lower-income households hardest. Unlike the rich, who can absorb price hikes, working families bear the brunt. Destabilize supply chains. Sudden policy shifts cause real economic harm, especially for small farmers and manufacturers. Wolff doesn't hesitate to call this class warfare disguised as populism, highlighting the hypocrisy of targeting the forgotten men and women while delivering punches through their wallets. A retreat of American global influence. Wolff is equally fierce in diagnosing the global fallout of Trump's policy. He bluntly labels it as a strategic retreat, not an assertion of strength. This is desperation, a flee before the flood tactic, not a walkback of American resolve. By slapping high tariffs across the board, the U.S. risks alienating long-standing allies and empowering adversaries, including China, the EU, and India, to band together. This protectionist play jeopardizes America's global alliances, markets, and economic stability. The most ominous element? a fractured American position on the world stage, becoming globally fragmented and isolated. Dangerous economic brinkmanship. Wolff warns of a tariff precipice, a dangerous edge that could trigger widespread economic collapse. Recession risk. He cites multiple analysts and his own data to argue that unchecked tariffs already fuel inflation and fear of an imminent recession. Market chaos. Volatility in stocks, bonds, and currency markets reflects the public's deep anxiety over Trump's unpredictability. Policy short-sightedness. Wolff emphasizes Trump's pattern of reacting to short-term media attention rather than constructing coherent long-term economic planning. Trump is gambling with our collective future, Wolff says. When you weaponize economics for political theater, you play with forces you don't control. Why Trump will lose it. Wolff predicts that confronting Trump with a barrage of economic truths, rising commodity prices, shrinking GDP, and plummeting confidence will provoke a ferocious backlash. Identity crisis incident. Tariffs are part of Trump's brand. Undermining them threatens his carefully constructed image as the ultimate dealmaker. Media backlash catalyst. With media outlets calling the policy fundamentally wrong, Trump may double down outraged, destroying any chance of pivoting or moderating his stance. Contact with reality. When the pain hits home, increasing food bills, delayed paychecks, the political charade falls apart, Wolff warns. In Wolff's words, Trump will go nuts once the economic reckoning outpaces the applause. Economic populism as spectacle. Richard Wolff masterfully deconstructs Donald Trump's use of tariffs, tax bills, and executive orders as pieces of political theater rather than coherent policy. Reality show economics, as many critics call it. Trump, he argues, isn't making sound economic decisions. He's staging them. He notes how Trump transformed arcane instruments like the tariff into headlines, drawing public attention and giving the appearance of decisive, muscular leadership, even as market analysts and economists warn of hidden fallout. Wolff goes even deeper. He'll be really pleased with that. Wolff paraphrases Michael Wolff on Trump's reaction to being back in the spotlight with tariffs. But the joke's on him, says Wolff. The spectacle distracts from rising inflation, disrupted supply chains, and backlash from global partners. Nationalism distorted, Fortress USA. Wolff argues Trump has repackaged nationalism as a shield for pro-corporate outcomes. Key points. Maganomics means closing off international trade not for worker uplift, but to funnel benefits to political allies and donor oligarchs. Cut social programs. Token help for unions via tariffs. But the wealthy, who fund Trump's base, get tax breaks, bailouts, and deregulation. The Trade Review Act and lawsuits, like the recent court ruling halting unilateral tariffs, reveal that even congressional Republicans wrestle with this policy's recklessness. Wolff peels away the bravado to expose this. Targeted retaliation and global instability are inherent outcomes, not exceptions. Allies undermined, foes empowered. One of Wolff's sharpest criticisms is how Trump's economic nationalism fractures alliances, alienating the EU, Canada, Japan, and simultaneously strengthens rivals. The EU has decried the tactics as fundamentally wrong, while China slapped back with 34% retaliatory tariffs. Meanwhile, BRICS stands to tighten its economic sway as Western economies falter. In Wolff's view, Trump isn't projecting strength, he's signaling desperation. The U.S. is on the losing end of a global repositioning game, but Trump is gambling on media-controlled bravado to paper over the decline. Oligarchy gains, workers' pay. Wolff repeatedly stresses the inequality baked into Trump's economic spectacle. Tariffs raise commodity prices, hitting working families hardest, those who can least afford inflation. Yet the main beneficiaries are corporations and oligarchic interests, who receive deregulation, tax breaks, and bailouts, all while workers absorb the cost. Even some union leaders, caught up in short-term gains, are perpetuating the class stratification by siding with policies that harm their own membership over time. Wolff sees this as a moral inversion. Make America great again becomes make the oligarchy great again. Why Trump will lose it here. Wolff warns we're quickly approaching a breaking point. Political identity threatened. Trump's persona as the deal-making alpha is under siege when his own tariffs boomerang destructively. Internal pushback. Nationalist-leaning Republicans and conservative economists are quietly wary, reportedly prompting bills like the Trade Review Act to constrain Trump's tariff ambitions. Global pushback. Allies threaten and enforce retaliation. Markets turn volatile. BRICS recalibrate global trade dominance. Class tensions ignite. Workers recognize that they're paying for policies not intended to serve them, spurring social unrest. Labor pushback and political consequences. Wolff's verdict. Trump's whole economic tourist act is unraveling, threatening his brand, his base, and potentially his sanity. Empire in decline and economic catastrophe unfolding. Richard Wolff paints a grim portrait. The United States is already deep into imperial decline. He notes central banks are shifting away from the dollar, down from 80% to 40% of global reserves. And today, BRICS nations together hold more economic power than the combined G7. Wolff underscores that instead of confronting this decline, Trump opts for reactive economic warfare, using tariffs and nationalist bluster to mask the reality of U.S. geopolitical weakness. 2. Sharpening inequality. Looming social unrest. The paradox is brutal. While working-class earnings stagnate, billionaire wealth is surging, growing by over $6 billion per day in 2024. Wolff warns this grotesque wealth transfer fosters unsustainable inequality that fuels social tension, even uprisings. He channels Marx. Capitalist overaccumulation often catastrophically turns on itself. In context, Wolff notes, when leaders deny the crisis, the burden falls on workers, who either revolt or collapse under debt and social rupture. From political spectacle to securitization and crisis, Wolff and analysts, the Daily Beast, suggest Trump's chaotic economic policies are not accidental but strategic, a shock therapy to consolidate authoritarian power. By creating crises, tariffs, inflation, market instability, Trump can invoke emergency measures and tighten control. Similar strategies appear in Hungary, Italy, and historical Germany. Create fear, offer a Hardman solution, deepen divisions, and consolidate authority. This is dangerous. It risks triggering a feedback loop where the public increasingly tolerates authoritarianism to stave off disorder, a path toward democratic erosion. Allies recede, rivals rise. Wolff emphasizes Trump's economic brinkmanship inadvertently pushes allies closer. EU, Japan, South Korea, while empowering rivals like China and BRICS, making the U.S. increasingly isolated. Tariffs on Taiwan and Vietnam, threats to BRICS. These moves fracture global order, but create openings for other power blocs. Politically and economically, the U.S. edges toward rogue status, with fewer nations aligned. The breaking point in Trump's impending fury. Wolff argues we've reached a tipping point. Economic breakdown, tariffs plus inflation plus stagnating wages. Crisis for most households. Domestic pushback, workers, unions, and even RPG lawmakers push back. Limits like the Trade Review Act show repression on tariff power. International backlash, global responses limit U.S. economic leverage. Retaliation intensifies social turbulence with debt-heavy, squeezed workers. Unrest is probable, as Marx warned. Wolff's prediction? When systemic collapse unfolds, markets crash, families suffer, alliances fray, Trump will go nuts. Unleashing authoritarian poses, blame campaigns, emergency declarations, and perhaps scapegoating to protect his fading empire and identity.